Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessie Jim, and I am the Nrcs Project Field Coordinator. I would like to thank Mr. Cody for setting aside time to provide his presentation this afternoon. Today's presentation, titled USDA Eqip Project on Navajo Rangeland, is going to be provided by Mr. Cody of Loop, Arizona, Navajo rancher. A couple of months ago, as you all recall, we had the Natural Resource Conservation Services program provide a presentation on their programs that they provide. So we are all familiar with those programs after the presentation, and today we wanted to provide a presentation from Eqip recipient and just his experience. So I'll go ahead and turn over the floor to you, Mal, and we'll go from there. Thank you again.
Okay, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. And again, my name is Mel Cody, Navajo rancher, coming to you today from Flagstaff, from my home. But however, my family's rangeland is located just north of Loop, Arizona, on the reservation. I'll go ahead and introduce my clans in Navajo, and it is the Ado Hashkanzoy, that's Ado Kachi, that's a Che, Ado Nakane, that's Nala Bay, the nation. And what I want to present on today is just my personal experience, so to speak. I'm a full-time rancher operating a small cow-calf operation. And I'm retired from the workforce several years ago, and this is how I stay busy now. So I thought I was going to be retired and, living on the lake and fishing, but that didn't happen. So now I'm back into a full-time status, but it's something that I love and something I have passion for. So therefore, it's not really a job to me. I look at it as an obligation and a way of life, so to speak. So with that, I will share with you a general presentation which will cover my water development project on my rangeland. My rangeland, as I said, is located in the southwest portion of the Navajo Nation, about 22 miles as the bird flies north of Loop, Arizona. This rangeland is fairly flat with rolling hills, low mesas with long valleys, and a high desert terrain. Not a whole lot of forest land up here. My tribal grazing permit in my name allows for up to about 112 sheep units. And what brought me to this endeavor about improving my rangeland, after I retired, I had taken over for my father. And my father was getting up there in years, and he's about 82, 83 years old now. And I say that because he was born on the land, and there was no record of what day or what year he was exactly born. And I think that's common for a lot of older folks on the reservation. What brought me to this endeavor was I started to notice climate change. And I think all of us can pretty much see that. And it wasn't nothing that was all of a sudden. It was very subtle. So I noticed a gradual downward and steady trend of the lack of precipitation from rain and snowfall. Of course, this resulted into the severe drought conditions that's now affecting the rangeland. And not just my rangeland, but pretty much widespread over the Southwest United States, but particularly on the Navajo reservation. I've heard this term in different ways, but for the most part, climate change, I think, sums it all up. And my rangeland is in a remote area. And with the lack of modern resources and infrastructure development and so forth, or modern roadways, it was definitely producing a lot of challenges for my rangeland. And this caused me to do an assessment. And I looked it over and, trying to identify what are my primary resource concerns, and I didn't have to think far or ponder out too far and realize that, hey, water is the source of everything. We hear water is life, right? And that's so true. And it's a general term, but it covers a lot of aspects. It sustains us as human beings. It sustains all the animals, whether they're livestock or wildlife, and the plant life and the forest life, obviously. So I had one primary source of water, but it was a debilitated tribal windmill system, which was breaking down quite a bit. And before it was no big deal, but with the climate change, and with the lack of routine moisture or precipitation fall, and where else was the water going to come from, other than digging deep wells and or improving the existing wells. Of course, all that takes resources, money, and manpower. So with that as my driving force, I really needed to address that immediately. I couldn't just wait for my leaders or my local government or the federal government to step in, and do it for me. This is something that I had to initiate. This is something that I had to get going and get off the ground as soon as possible and start addressing it the best way I possibly can. And I figured, well, I got to do this now if I'm going to have any chance of helping the animals and improving my rangeland to sustain this long tradition of ranching that I grew up in or I was raised in. So the next step was, okay, since I identified my resource problem, I had to begin planning. And my planning started several years ago, and probably 2 or 3 years prior to the pandemic. Of course, who knew the pandemic was coming? No one did, right? So as I started to plan, I had the ball rolling. And fortunately I did, because when the pandemic hit, I mean, it just threw everything out of whack, as we know. And things were shutting down. My partners, government organizations, you couldn't reach them. You couldn't go to meet them, and everything just got thrown in a whirlwind. And it was really tough after that to continue the process. And there's a few times where I said, what, is this really worth it? And whatnot. But I kept going back to, wait a minute. I don't like to see any animal suffer, whether it's my cattle, my horses, my dogs, my sheep, my dogs, or whatever. I'm always going to have that helping hand, or that heart for them, that, hey, they're beings on this earth just as we are, and they're looking at us to help them. So I said, I got to continue here. And as I started the process, I started to talk to people. I started to educate myself, research online, et cetera. And go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I started looking into programs or other types of assistance that was offered either by the tribe or federal government or by the state. And as I went through this, I eventually stumbled upon a program that was offered by USDA, what stands for United States Department of Agriculture. And the USDA is just a blanket department for anything that falls under agriculture. And one of the programs that was listed was the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. In short, the acronym spells Eqip. So this is an option for a producer like myself and other producers out there that may be on the line, that maybe hasn't explored this program, I would highly recommend it. And the information on this particular slide here is this information I took off the website when I was searching under Eqip. And it's just a broad, general, and short and sweet statement of what Eqip is. So I don't represent USDA in any official capacity, other than I am a USDA Eqip participant, which means I have a contract with them, but I'm not an employee of them or a representative of them. But I would recommend you research the USDA and look under NRCS. NRCS stands for Natural Resource Conservation Service. And you'll find a host of programs under NRCS, and one in particular is Eqip, and that's the one that struck me and caught my eye. So I took full advantage of it, and I'm glad that I did. So if you look under a definition for Eqip, according to USDA, in a nutshell, Eqip is a United States government program designed to assist farmers, producers in improving environmental quality, particularly water quality and soil conservation. Many years ago, Congress established the program in the 1996 Farm Bill to provide primarily cost-sharing assistance, but also technical and educational assistance aimed at promoting production and environmental quality and optimizing environmental benefits. And then that description also came from the website. In essence, Eqip pays for a broad spectrum of conservation practices that you may be interested in. It's a diverse program and is an excellent program and option for improving your rangeland. And I can attest to that. To get started, and what I went through, you have to identify your rangeland resource problems, as I stated before. In my case, it was the lack of adequate water sources for my animals. Once you do that, and then you want to seek out rangeland conservation trainings that's offered in your area. You want to find a training session that offers classroom and hands-on practical instruction. So you want to have a classroom and then the hands-on together, so you thoroughly understand what's being taught. You want to educate yourself as much as possible with as much information available online, and in addition to speak with other local rangeland experts or conservationists, or seasoned ranchers and farmers, that have been doing that job for quite a few years, or have many years of experience. When you've attained a good base of knowledge and developed a comprehensive conservation plan for your rangeland, you want to consult with your local USDA, NRCS, district conservationists that are titled district conservationists, and they are actual USDA employees under NRCS, with a specific job title, which is that district conservationist, and they will assist you with the whole process. So obviously, when you do develop your conservation plan and you're satisfied with that it's a good product, and you're working with your assigned district conservationist, you're going to apply for the Eqip program. And each state, as I understand, will have different deadlines for applications, Eqip applications. And you can get that information from your district conservationist. And like I said, they'll guide you through the whole process and make sure that all your application information is submitted in a timely manner. And they'll be able to give you updates on what's going on. It's important to know that the Eqip program is also a voluntary program. So in some cases, it can be very competitive depending on what area that you're in. And the program has various deadlines, as I stated before, to submit applications. But do establish a good working relationship with your local district conservationist, and that's going to be key going through the process. Now, don't be alarmed when I say it's a competitive process. But if you work hard and you put together the best possible conservation plan while working with your local community and your district conservationist, and you will have a good chance of getting approved for a contract. Now, I'm not sure how many contracts USDA puts out there. I mean, that's something your district conservation is going to know or should know. But all I can tell you is just to do the best you can, what you have control of. Don't give up, be patient. You'll eventually get there, if you stay persistent. So what I'm saying is you may not get approved the first time you submit, but you want to follow up again the next time you're eligible. And fortunately, in my case, I was eligible for a contract the first time around, and that worked out very well for me. But it's my understanding that in other areas sometimes people aren't so fortunate. But that's where I say make sure you stick with it. You stay dedicated to it. You stay persistent, and put together the best product you possibly can. With assistance. You might have somebody who's a really good grant writer or somebody who's well educated. They can help you put your plan together very well. And then, of course, when it's endorsed by your district conservationist, and then it's only going to bode well for you from there on. Other than that, that's just a brief explanation of the Eqip project or Eqip program under USDA. USDA has other programs available that I'm not too familiar with, other than just having general knowledge. But that's why I keep saying work with your district conservationist, and they can take you through all the programs that are available and see which one fits and suits you the best. Okay, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, this particular slide here, I titled it Range and Farmland Stewardship. A lot of us have similar stories growing up on the rangeland or in the country in general. In my case, it's on the Navajo reservation. As a young man, I remember my parents, my grandparents talking to me about respecting and taking care of the land, in addition to the horses and the livestock. And I understood this as them indicating that it would protect our way of life as it was on the reservation. I was a young man at the time. I'm probably looking at about maybe 10 years old. I didn't realize what they were really referring to, but as I got older, I realized it was land stewardship. And when I use the term land stewardship, I'm talking about not just specifically taking care of the land, but that's where it starts. If you take care of the land, which includes the water that's in the ground, and the forage and all the livestock and wildlife that feed off it, that's what I'm saying as land stewardship. Now, in the photo here on this particular slide, you see an older gentleman on a white horse pushing some cattle. The older gentleman there happens to be my father. He is 82, 83 years old, as I said, and he's pushing about half of my herd from one area and back across the wash to another area. And my father, I got to hand it to him. He's one of the old cowboys, and he's still tough as nails. So he still trains horses. He still shoes horses, and there's just no indication of give up. He's slowed down quite a bit, and he can't just hop on a horse with one leap anymore or get off. But he still gets it done, and I still look up to him. Just recently here over the summer, I was talking to him, and all of a sudden he just made a broad statement when I was telling him about rangeland conservation and what I was researching and some of the meetings I had been going to. He just looked at me and said, "Son, I'm an old man now, but I still have a lot to learn." And he just left it at that. And I didn't really dismiss it right there, but after a while, I started to ponder upon it. What did he mean by that? But we had this conversation about land conservation and how we grew up and what my grandpa taught him, and he was passing on to me. Things started to click, and the light came on later on, and I took it as to continue to seek knowledge because you're never too old to learn. So, okay, that just kind of revitalized my drive to educate myself and seek more training to develop. At the time I was working on my conservation plan. And that's just a little bit on that as far as a little bit of a history note. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And here is the windmill that's in my rangeland. Now here, you look at it, it's not dilapidated like it once was. Now the storage tank, the large storage tank you see there, that's actually a 24,000 gallon water tank. And it's a modern, up to date, up to spec tank, and it's treated on the inside to where the water, is not contaminated right away, and it stores the best possible water because of the inner coating. But the old system, the old windmill, and the storage tank was just so rusted out. It looked like just a ruin out there, and it had been like that for some time. The water troughs were all deformed, and then they were pretty well rusted out as well. The windmill was very tired. It needed new plumbing parts, motor, and what have you. So it just wasn't very efficient. And with the only water source in that area, and in the middle of the summer, when the animals are most thirsty, this windmill just wasn't keeping up, with the thirst of the animals. So when I first started talking about my resource concerns and water being up at the top of my list, I had to start here because this was the only source of water. I couldn't rely on the weather. Like I said, the climate change was starting to change that pattern. So, but I had to do something. It's either just go through a great expense and buy a large water truck, a water tank, or whatever, and just start hauling water from miles and miles away. And I knew I couldn't sustain that, unless you have deep pockets, and I don't. So I had to first address this problem here, and I said, okay, wait a minute, I need an updated windmill well, which means all the old parts needed to be gutted out. A new storage tank needs to be installed, and new valves, etc. And also to increase the size of the well pipe so that it can pull more water out of the water table. And this particular windmill, like most windmills in the Navajo Nation, are owned by individuals. They belong to the Department of Water Resources, on the Navajo Nation. So I couldn't just go on my own and improve this, even if I had the money. Therefore, there was a lot of unknowns and not sure how to go about things. That's where I knew that, okay, I got to start talking to people. I got to talking to industry experts. I got to start talking to conservationists. I need to start talking to my local chapter officials and anybody that was associated, with water resources. This also included the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Natural Resource Conservation Service as well. And to make a long story short, I started networking. I started attending meetings, like raising meetings. I started raising these issues, and I started talking first with my local community, though. Now, this area is shared by my relatives, and my relatives include my aunts and uncles, cousins, and secondary relatives that also live in that area using this rangeland, because I knew that although I had a permit to graze my animals in this area, I didn't have the whole say on what to do with it. I was a stakeholder, I understood, but I knew I needed to sell this idea. And that's an important thing where you need to start. And that's what I suggest for you to think about, and it'll be your initial starting point, is to figure out a way to sell it. Fortunately, in my family, we all get along. We still come together for big holidays, and from time to time, maybe other celebrations to where we get together, and everybody's still cordial. And so I was fortunate not to have any resistance when it came down to selling my idea about the improvements I wanted to make to our rangeland, which opened the door for having them give me consent to go forward with this project. And that's probably the biggest obstacle you're going to have to come over. And without that, you can't start anything. And on the reservation, if you have the consent of other grazing permit holders or users in your area, and everybody buys into your idea, everything just goes a whole lot smoother. But in other cases, we also have, all of us have relatives that, they can be a little difficult, so I guess you're just going to have to be innovative on how you persuade them to come on board. The other thing you might want to talk to your folks and your family and your friends and your neighbors about is the financial obligation. There's a little bit of a financial obligation. You have to have a little bit of revenue to work with, especially when you first get started, because the USDA is not going to fund the project from the get-go, but it'll be broken up into phases, construction phases. In my case, there was 4 construction phases. After I completed each one, I submitted my documentation for reimbursement, and I was reimbursed at that time. So anyway, not to get off too far off subject, my starting point for my water project started here, to where once we established a good water pumping source to support my water project, everything else just fell in place. So once you realize and identify your resource concern, that's going to be your starting point, and that's where your planning needs to start. Okay, go into the next slide, please. So I took this out of my conservation plan, and this is just a general description of the underground pipeline that I had installed over the last probably 12, 13 months since I began. The large dot there in the center near the top, just below the word reservation there, that's the windmill that I just showed you in the previous slide. So here's my primary source of water. And this windmill, I was very fortunate, or we were very fortunate that used this windmill, it's a constant source of water as long as the windmill is in good working condition. And it's never run out of water. And I think we're in a good part of the water table that we tapped into when this well was initially built. So we're fortunate there. So as you can see, you'll see lines going in various directions. And those indicate pipelines, 2-inch pipelines. And at the end of each line there on that diagram are other large water storage tanks with livestock water troughs. So what I noticed on my rangeland in the winter, when the cattle and the horses and the wildlife aren't as thirsty, I was losing a lot of water when the windmill tank filled up, and it was just going into the overflow, which was just a small dam that was built adjacent to the water troughs. So granted, it held a little bit of water, but the majority of it was just seeping back into the ground. So, and then really no way of saving it. I've had other relatives put smaller tanks, next to the primary windmill tank, but eventually those will get filled too. So I thought, wait a minute, I lose water when it rains through the gullies and whatnot. And if I don't dam them up, the water just goes down to the next county, so to speak. So I said, I have to figure out a way to hold the water that's available. So in this case, working with Nrcs and my district conservationists, we went out there and assessed the land. And that's what you want to do, is to convince your district conservationists to come out to your rangeland and take a look at what you got. And with his expertise or her expertise, they can evaluate the land and give you some good suggestions. And that's what happened in this case, where we identified strategic locations for the pipeline and for each water tank and water trough location. And the outline there in red and yellow, the yellow represents my customer use area based on a map that my grandfather had received back in the 40s, I believe. I'm not sure. And then the red line on the outside is just an arbitrary boundary that circumferences my planting area, for my conservation plan. And those aren't fence lines or drawn lines in the dirt with fences or stakes or anything like that. It's just a designation of what my planting area is. And for the most part, this is where all my animals graze. And so back to what I said initially about developing a good conservation plan for your rangeland, it takes a lot of input, not just from yourself, but includes other permit holders in your area or other family or neighbors or friends that use the same rangeland, and meet with them individually or together. And this is all part about selling your plan, because ultimately you want to improve your rangeland. And if you can't get everybody else on board and you can't get the necessary consents, and then your plan is just going to be a plan. So you have to be innovative, and you have to be a salesman, so to speak, to sell your plan. And if you have the right intentions, and you have a solid plan and solutions, anyone should see that, hey, you know what, I think you're onto something, and yeah, I support that. So that is your goal when it comes to that. Again, actively seek out conservation planning training now, because you're going to have to go through a formal training session, which is a classroom and hands-on, in order to really grasp the idea of putting together a conservation plan. And inside the conservation plan are other elements. You'll have your soil maps, you'll have your livestock inventory, all this other stuff that's that makes up your conservation plan. And there were a lot of moving parts in there, but when you go through the training, you'll be taught how to put it in the proper areas with the proper language and the proper categories in order to put that plan together. And then again, I can't stress enough that you work closely with your district conservationist, and he or she is really going to be your your saving grace when it comes down to making sure that you satisfied all the elements of your plan. This is going to be an ongoing thing for you. You wanna stay dedicated. You want to be patient with the process. Stay positive and continue to be determined about not only completing your plan, but also through to receiving and obtaining a USDA Eqip contract, because obviously that's going to be your ultimate goal there. Eqip, I alluded to it earlier. It's a cost share program. My understanding, in my case, it was 90-10. Which means 90% was going to be funded by USDA and 10% I was obligated to. However, don't let that scare you. And there are things that I did in my case, and I can elaborate and I can share this with you if you're interested going through it, on things that I did to minimize my liability as far as when it came to the funding part. And there's other things that you can do to offset that cost share too. In my case, I attended a lot of meetings, and anything that pertained to my Eqip project, I was able to count towards my 10%, and I really reduced my funding liability at the end. The other thing that you want to do once you do get a contract is you have to have a really good accounting system. Now, I'm not an accountant, but I'm pretty good at keeping records. And if you have livestock, you probably already have a vaccination record or cattle inventory record. It's nothing more than that. You're just adding different categories. And as long as you keep everything in chronological order, and you have everything documented, and you have that separate file for it, and then it's easier at the end. In my case, I presented all those documents to my CPA and my tax professional, and he was able to really help me out as far as having little to no tax liability for my project. I say that because when you have a project for a certain year, let's just say it goes for 3 years, you're going to have 3 years of tax liability. So USDA will send you a 1099-G, and that's a tax form that's generated by the government, and that'll indicate how much money was allocated for that particular year for your project. And then it's up to you to make sure that you justify the use for that. But like I said, if you keep good records on everything, keep your receipts, and you give that to your tax professional, they will know how to accommodate that, so you won't have a big tax liability. But it's just something good to know. In my case, there, in the illustration on the map that I have there on the slide, that illustrates approximately 8 miles of water line, and it covers approximately about a 5-mile radius. Just in case you're a little curious about how much area that is. So that was quite a bit of work, but fortunately, I had some good workers that were working for me. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so you secured a Eqip contract. Now, as soon as you receive that, that doesn't mean you can start construction the next day. You have to be aware of certain clearances that have to be done, environmental clearances. On the reservation, you have grazing consents that need to be secured, followed up by cultural and archaeological clearances that need to be set in place, and anything else that's required for your area needs to be approved prior to commencing your construction. In my case, I had to go a step further. I had to go and present at my local chapter house and request a supporting resolution for my project. And fortunately, by that time, I was heavily involved in this, and I was well educated and informed that I was presenting at the chapter house wasn't a big deal, and I was able to answer the questions that they had, and I got unanimous approval at that location or that location of the process. And from there, it went on up to Wonder Rock and went through that process. And then somewhere down the line, USDA finally got all the clearances approved and gave me the go ahead. So when that happened, now I had to see how I was going to construct, or how I was going to go about the construction phases. Like I said, my project was broken up into 4 phases. This particular picture is the second phase. So in the slide there, I have written waterline installation process by skilled work. Specialized heavy equipment and tools. Hired workers must be physically fit, dependable, knowledgeable, with good work ethic. You know, like the old saying, you know, good help is hard to find, and then that is so true. In this case, I was very fortunate, and having when I was doing my networking and talking to people and going to meetings, several people had told me that there's 2 individuals that are in the local area that have a lot of experience. They're dependable, and they're hard workers, and they're physically fit. And I just got lucky, and the 2 guys happened to be in between jobs. So I was able to hire them, and it was important for me to treat them right as well. So based on my budget for my contract, I was able to pay them the amount of money that they were requesting. We did a little negotiating, but we came to an understanding. And as a result, they were happy, and the end result, I was happy. But the work that they did was on a professional level, and the work ethic that they displayed, the safety, and I guess the willingness to work through adverse conditions. Sometimes the weather was just so hot out here; it was triple digits. Sometimes the wind would blow, but they never really complained, and they found ways to get around that. And it just got so bad, then we just all decided, hey, let's not work today, come back tomorrow. But for the most part, I was able to depend on them, because I was ultimately responsible to install and construct my water development project. If these guys weren't reliable, or if they thought that they weren't being treated well and had to leave or something, then of course I'd be in a tight spot again. But when you embark on your construction phase, make sure you go and ask other people, maybe that did similar jobs, or maybe just a local community, and find out where you can find good solid workers for your area. Sometimes you can look no further in your family, or maybe you have some friends. In this case, I'm an able body as well, so I was the third leg in this operation here. So although I wasn't a skilled worker like these guys, it was important that I made sure that the logistics, the supplies, and the ordering was all done at appropriate times, so that we didn't have any delays in the project. So the moral of the story is do the best you can on getting the best possible workers as possible. Make sure that all your clearances are done, and that you continue to consult with your conservationists. because you may run into a terrain problem that maybe deviates off your plan, because you're going to receive engineered plans and you're going to have to follow that. So any questions about that or problems, you want to contact your district conservationist. In turn, they'll contact the USDA engineer, and then they'll work on a solution for you. And this way you don't violate any policies or regulations, anything like that. So we can go on to the next project, or next slide, I'm sorry. Proper supplies, materials, and equipment. Equally as important as getting good, solid help, I have written here, thorough planning prior to construction phases will be key to the overall success and timely completion of your projects. Now, in my case, I had some trouble obtaining all my storage tanks, like the one you see there. And that one there is a 9,000 gallon galvanized water tank that was engineered to USDA specs. And the reason for that is because recently we went through a shortage of steel, and then this was nationwide. So steel companies weren't producing the steel, and then the water tank manufacturing plants weren't receiving the steel, so they couldn't build anymore. So fortunately, through my networking and working closely with my partners, and then also getting establishing a close and professional relationship with the Department of Water Resources in Windmill, these tanks that I received here were actually allocated for other projects, but because they hadn't gotten off the ground or they were slow in process, in essence, these tanks were shifted to my project, and the tanks that were being manufactured for me will replace those other ones for the other projects. And if I established that good relationship with my partners, something like that probably wouldn't have happened, and then I probably would have just been now receiving my water tanks. But here you see, I have a large crane, I have the trencher operator, and my truck's parked over there to the right, and then I have a sufficient amount of workers to do this safely. And the gentleman there in the foreground in the light green shirt is the local water department supervisor. And of course, they're always behind on their own projects. But because I established that good working relationship with him and his crew, they were able to come out on the day that I needed them. And therefore, there was no downtime or delays on my project because I couldn't get the equipment to do it. And plus, they had the know-how and the expertise on placing these very heavy water tanks. This particular one probably weighs 5,000 pounds. And that if you don't put it down properly in the proper method, then you could damage it, or someone could get hurt. But there was a lot of logistical and safety concerns involved, just to make sure that we did this in the proper method, and everybody went home, with all their fingers and toes and whatnot. So making sure that you plan and ordering the proper materials and the proper equipment is very essential. Making sure the installation process goes correctly and right the first time, because otherwise, if something gets omitted, something doesn't get installed properly, you're not going to pass inspection. You're going to have to go back there and redo it again. It's going to involve bringing this type of equipment back out there, which is the last thing you really want to do. So be very mindful when it comes to this particular process. And if you don't have that knowledge, or if you're not sure how to go about it, again, work closely with your district conservationist, the workers that you hired, or other experts in the area that can give you, solid advice on how to do it properly. And I think that pretty much speaks for itself. And we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And the end result. You had a starting point, then you're going to have an ending point. So here is phase two, the end of phase two of my water line project. So if you look at the water troughs in the foreground and the large water tank in the background, on the backside of the water tank is where the trench line comes in. So this is one of the water tanks and water troughs that was placed strategically on my rangeland for convenience of the livestock. So here it just illustrates of the end product for that area. And here I have written, if you work hard in achieving the goals and objectives of your Eqip project, the result will be very satisfying and worth the time you invested. Helping your horses, livestock, and wildlife through rangeland improvements will always be a worthwhile endeavor. So, in essence, keep an eye on your keep your eye on the prize. When you initially set out, you had goals and objectives, and you have to always keep that on the horizon when you're out here working, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong. There could be potential resistance from people in the area thinking that you're, I don't know, encroaching on their rangeland, the way they understand it. So there's a lot of minor disputes that you might have to be involved in. But if you have the initial understanding among everybody at the beginning, which includes your family, other grazing permit holders, your neighbors, your friends in the area, it'll pretty much quell a lot of that, and a lot of that will get cleared up. And I say that because I had one particular relative that took opposition to this halfway through the project. But I went back and approached that particular relative, had a conversation, and also had Nrcs conservationists talk with them, with the BIA and the Navajo Nation, and with the support of my family, we were able to come to an understanding, and now that person is back fully on board. So yeah, hadn't I not done that initially, and then that could have stopped my project potentially. I don't know if it would have, but it would have potentially be a stumbling block. So always have that perseverance, I guess, to see it to the end. So with the new water lines and the new water tanks, I now can enjoy 60,000 gallons of water stored where otherwise I wouldn't have. So just put that in perspective, here we're in this severe drought location. I mean, even any ounce of water is going to count, and it's important. Hadn't I not taken this initiative on myself to embark on this project, I would have still been dealing with the old broken down windmill with the dilapidated water tank and whatnot, and with the lack of moisture and the dirt tanks and the earthen dams, not holding water because they were all busted or in disrepair. I wouldn't be very, I wouldn't have I wouldn't be a very good steward of the land. In essence, I still wouldn't be helping my animals. So that's the whole idea behind this, the rangeland improvement. However you identify it for your area, whether it's through water lines and storage tanks like it was for me. I mean, it could be something else for you. It could be drainage control. It could be forage restoration, something along those lines, but whatever you do for the land and the animals is always going to be a good thing. This process, granted, I'm giving it to you in just in general terms. There's not a whole lot of moving parts, but there are some parts where you have to stay ahead of and keep on top of in order to keep it going. And fortunately, in my case, I had good people on my side, and I'm not a highly educated person, but I do have enough knowledge and drive and determination to make sure that I get where I need to be. And if I don't understand something, I always ask that question. and you got to ask a lot of questions, and you got to talk to enough people, because when you do that, this person may know something, that person may know something. And then at the end, all of a sudden you have all these options. And then that's going to open the door on down the line. So in essence, that's what I'm talking about there. And this will kind of go along with the next slide I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and go with that one. So when I completed my project, I met with my USDA conservationist engineer. And in my case, he had to see water come out into the troughs in order to be signed off that particular project. So I was so certain that that would happen. So when he came out, when I turned the valve on, the water just came rushing out, gushing out. And when that water gushed out, I mean, it was such a good feeling. And when I did it for each one of my projects, and when I finally got the final signed off at the end, when everything was completed, and I got, my project signed off by USDA, I was left standing there alone at the windmill. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? This idea came about 3 years ago. And I never thought that in 3 years that I'd be standing there and all of a sudden had completed what I embarked on. And it took me back. Well, I got a little emotional, and I reflected back on when my children were born. Obviously that was a miracle, but in this case, my emotions were similar. And I had my doubts, and I had some setbacks, but I persevered. I continued to go forward, and I pondered upon what I had accomplished. So as I did that over the next week or two, I started writing some things down. And then I came to this personal quote. Now, I can't say I own all of this. I stole parts of it from here, from there, and there, right? But it all pertained to me. So what I was thinking to myself at that point when I finally completed everything was, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity Eqip provided me. And I was able to help my land. I was able to help my animals, the wildlife. And in essence, I'm looking at something that's going to benefit me now and the permit holders, and also future generations. So my kids and grandkids can also benefit from this down the road. And that's when I kind of lost it, and that's when I came up with this quote. And here it says, when I completed my Eqip water development project on my rangeland, there was this great sense of accomplishment that came over me. There was no ticker tape parade or congratulations by anyone. I just lifted my hat, wiped the sweat from my brow, got into my truck, and began the long drive home. And then I thought, man, what I didn't know at that particular time was that this experience would change my life forever. I was part of something great, and greatness, no matter how brief, stays with a man. Every rancher dreams of a chance to improve their rangeland. This rancher lived it. I had to put it that way because that's what I was feeling, and that's how passionate I was about it. And I just want to share it, and I want to put it out there, and also as a motivation for you, perspective, and inspiring ranchers or farmers that want to improve your rangeland or your farmland. So with that, I thank you, and I believe the very next slide is going to be my contact information. I welcome you to contact me, email me, call me, and we can talk about a few things, and maybe we can get you started on the right foot and in the right direction, improving your rangeland. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mal. That was a good presentation and very informative on the rancher level. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to anybody that has some questions, comments. Go ahead and raise your hand and we can unmute you. If not, we do have the Q&A box open and the chat box open. But, I know you get this question a lot, maybe, Mel, but, from start to finish, after, you applied with the FSA Nrcs for the Eqip program to the end of the project? How long was that process to receive word back and, you're approved, your project, and to the end? What was the time span on that?
Okay. It was about 3 years. It's about 3 years. And I want to say maybe a year and a half of that was because of the pandemic. But I think it's unique to each individual as far as the time span. I don't know of other average time frames that people go through, but in my case, it was a total of 3 years before I had a signed contract. But there was a time where USDA had a problem with not a problem, their archaeologists had left. So that kind of backlogged things too, as far as getting my design plans all approved. So there's elements in there and various elements in there that could kind of delay things. But I suppose if everything went through like it was supposed to, I probably would have got it much sooner than that.
Right. Okay. So the departments you've worked with, of course, with the USDA, Nrcs, and then as far as the Navajo Nation departments, which departments were you working with to get the clearances? How many people, what's the process on that?
Well, for the most part, the district conservation is going to order a lot of those things for you and kind of blaze the trail for you. Initially getting started, there's a little bit of downtime because district conservationist has to coordinate with a surveyor, has to coordinate with the archaeologist and the engineer. And as you know, they all have different schedules. So it wasn't back to back, so it was like maybe a month here, a couple months there with each individual entity in order to get that and finally get it submitted to for cultural clearances and all that stuff through the historic preservation department in Window Rock. Initially, things were moving on pretty good because, like I said, USDA had an assigned archaeologist on board specifically for USDA projects. But somewhere along the way, I believe the archaeologist left for one reason or another, and I was kind of limbo there for a while. But fortunately, I was also affiliated, and again through my networking, with an organization called First Nations Development Institute. There's a lady there by the name of Jackie Frank. She's the vice president of the organization, and I had established a relationship with her, and they had some opportunities and some grant money available for an independent archaeologist that could do work on Navajo. And fortunately, the second part of my construction phase, the Navajo tribe allowed her to come in and to conduct that, and we were able to move on that way. So, there's always more than one way to do things, and unfortunately, those things fell into place for me.
Right. Okay. And then also, what was the total amount, the cost to implement this project? And then with USDA, you said it was in 4 phases. And with Eqip, they do provide up to 90% of the cost. And so, did they wait until the end of the project and release the 90%, or did they go by your phases? Are you able to?
No, that's
okay.
That's a good question. That's an excellent question. But no, fortunately, we had it set up to where we identified each phase. Now, these phases could be different for each project, obviously, but in my case, it was determined to be 4 phases. So each time I completed a phase, I could submit all my documentation, my receipts, my expenses and whatever else that's eligible for reimbursement to the USDA on an Excel spreadsheet, and with invoices and other miscellaneous receipts, like if I went to the local hardware store and I had to buy certain materials, and then other expenses that I incurred, like the mileage if I use my own vehicle, my own equipment, other allowable expenses like that. And once I uh, completed that package documentation, I submitted it to my district conservationist, and then they reviewed it, and if everything was good to go, and then the reimbursement came through within about 2 weeks or so. And that's what happened on each of the phases as I went along. So fortunately, I was able to do it that way and not have to wait till the end, because, I probably would have gotten broke or had to borrow some money, in order to make it happen.
Right. Okay. And then also, you talked about switching gears. You talked about your range management, and you do have your boundary fencing, but as far as cross fencing, there's no cross fencing. How do you move your cattle around your pasture? Are all of your watering holes, filled with water, or what how do you manage your grazing area without fencing, cross fencing at least?
Yeah, and that's another excellent question there. And before, without having my water development project in place, all the cattle, if all the dirt dams had dried up, and like I said, my windmill is the only source of water, all the animals, whether they be livestock, horses, feral horses, or wildlife, had to come to the windmill in order to satisfy their thirst. So when that happened, and it was detrimental in more ways than one. The first time is that this windmill was being stretched out because it was constantly moving and having to supply water. So all the moving parts were constantly wearing. So when that happens, then the windmill doesn't last as long. The other thing is the cattle, since they had to walk so far to get to the windmill, they would only go so far out and have to come back in because it's the only water source. And that caused overgrazing probably within about a 2 mile radius of that windmill. And this area has been so beaten down that grass eventually just stopped growing. So then cattle had to go a little further out. But when that happened, the cattle had to walk a long distance to the windmill. So whatever they ate out there, whatever, they lost some calories walking to and from. And it wasn't very good for the calves too, because it was stressing them out as well. So when I put my water system in, and without having cross fences and establish what they call range management units, it was tough to control your cattle and to move them from one location to the other without that fence. But in this case, I'm essentially doing the same thing. That's why I say I strategically put new water tanks and water troughs in several different areas of my rangeland, as illustrated on the map that I had on the PowerPoint. Now I can control the watering points through the valves that I installed there, and I can turn them on and off on demand. So right now I have five watering locations. I have 4 off and only 1 on, and that's the furthest one southeast of the windmill. And I was just out there yesterday, and my cattle were in that area, and there's a good amount of forage in that area from the recent moisture. So now, an area that normally wasn't overgrazed is now sustaining the carrying capacity of my animals. And the other 4 areas, are now rested. I mean, I might get a lone horse or a lone cow through there once in a while, but that's not enough to make a difference. So now I'm just about to get ready to turn that one off and turn the next one up a little further north on. So by doing that, it forces the cattle to go to the water source. And so I'm going to do a counterclockwise rotation in my area and see how that works. I might have to turn 2 on maybe, but nonetheless, I have a lot more control of where my cattle go and graze and water, because of this. And I'm really happy now that if you go out to the Windmill area within that 2 mile radius I was talking about, you can see the grass coming back up. The soil, the land is being rehabilitated just because I took the pressure off the cattle off it. So in that essence, without the cross fencing, I can control the movement and the rotation of my cattle by turning on and off those watering points that I installed.
Wow. Okay. Marge, do you have a question? Let me go ahead and allow you to ask your question.
In the chat there.
Yeah. Let's see. Just a couple of comment from Michael Patrick. Great presentation, Mr. Cody. You walked us through a relative complex USDA program in understandable terms.
Oh,
so that's from Michael. Yeah, go ahead, Marge. You can ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Marge Lantana. I'm from Vicente in Eastern Agency. I just popped in 30 minutes into your presentation, Mr. Cody. I clearly understand your presentation. I can just visualize all your projects that you have implemented. I commend you for doing an excellent job, and thank you. Jesse, for putting on a person that really just clarified everything. My question is, Mr. Cody, do you plan to continue participating under natural resource conservation programs such as land stewardship program? Because it just sounds like you already had just laid out the whole plan. Now the operation's just gonna go on and see all the roses down the road. So that was my question. Or did you already do the land stewardship program?
I guess in a lot of ways I have, Marge, and I thank you for asking those questions. And I appreciate your kind words, and that keeps me going. I think we're all put on this earth for one reason or another. We all have a purpose and gifts. So I guess we just need to identify that and go with it. In my case, I'm not 100% sure, but in a case like this where I'm passionate about land stewardship, range conservation, herd health, anything that has to do with helping out our land and our animals, I'm always going to be there. So if I can provide a voice and comment or offer good suggestions or options, that's what I'm all about. So in this case, Michael alluded to the same thing, and it sounds like I'll be working with him and Jesse and the rest of the crew on other programs. Anytime I can help educate, whether it's our children or older folks or whoever, in a positive manner, I think all of us are obligated to do that. A lot of us are reserved, but as Jesse knows, I'm not a loss for words, but and I'm not a highly educated man, but I know a lot of things about most things I say. And I've been around this earth for some time, so I have a lot of life experience as well. So I think it's my duty, as it is most for most people, to help people in one way or another. So yes, I do. I want to continue this wherever it takes me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marge, for your question and tuning in, and thank you, everyone. I think that concludes our Q&A session. But I would just like to say thank you, Mal, for providing your presentation on your experience with the just laying it out. It does sound intimidating at first when you hear of the program, and then also the length of wait time. But in the end, like you said, it is worth it. Okay. We do have a question. I was late and not sure how much I missed. Will the presentation slides be available after? Yes, Jenna, they will be available. We will post the webinar. It's being recorded, and we will post it to our Facebook page and then also our YouTube channel. If you would like to have the slides emailed to you, the next slide will have my email address, and you can email and request it from there. And then we'll get you the slides from today. So, with that, thank you again, Mel, for your presentation. And thank you everyone for attending this afternoon's presentation. It's very good. If anything, it's encouraging for our producers to go out there and, try and get on these programs. On the screen, you do see our upcoming webinars. Join us next week on the 19th at 5:30. We will be having a composting presentation by Mr. Kevin Lombard of the NMSU Ag Science Center. The link is there. And then we will conclude October webinars with greenhouse management by Daryl Yazzie of the Ned College Land Grant Office on the 27th at 4 p.m. And then, like I mentioned, we do have our Facebook page out there. It's Native American Producers Success Project. On there, we do, not only do we have our past webinars on there, but we also have useful USDA program information on gardening, livestock publication. And then we also have some how-to videos. And then we do distribute monthly newsletters. My email address is on there, jess.jim84@gmail.com, and then Sharon's and Jana as well. Again, thank you for attending. Let us know, what other type of information you would like to learn about. When you guys exit the webinar, there's going to be a screen that will pop up, and it gives you a chance to rate today's presentation and then also give us some suggestions for next month's webinar lineup. So with that, thank you. Please continue to be safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and have a great rest of your day. Mal, thank you again. We'll be in contact.
Thank you.
The Native American Producers Success Project, or NAPS project in short, is a collaborative effort between Dene Inc., a nonprofit organization, the New Mexico State University Cooperative Extension Services, and Dene College Land Grant Office. This project is being funded by USDA's Office of Partnership and Public Engagement and Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. The NAPS project field staff consists of myself, our assistant coordinator, Sharon Sandman, and our technology media coordinator, Janet Johnson. Okay, so the NAPS project, we have the overall goal to increase the profitability and long-term sustainability of Navajo farmers and ranchers. To help us achieve this goal, there are some activities that we are currently providing in 4 key areas, which include improving Navajo farm and ranch operations through a series of workshops focusing on crop-related topics and livestock-related topics. We are also increasing our Navajo farmers and ranchers' knowledge of and access to available programs and technical assistance provided by USDA, BIA, Navajo Nation, New Mexico State Cooperative Extension Services, Dene College Land Grant Office, and other professionals. We are also strengthening the organizational capacity of the Navajo Farmer and Rancher Congress to address the current and future needs of Navajo farmers and ranchers. And last but not least, facilitating Navajo farmers and ranchers' use of USDA programs such as NRCS, FSA, and RMA programs.